I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition. It's Thursday, February 6th, 2014. Tonight I have a jam-packed broadcast for you. If any broadcast of mine will get blocked, it'll probably be this one because of what I'll be playing in the second hour. And that would be the full, uncut, unedited interview that Ed Snowden did about 2 weeks ago now with a German television network. And every time this interview has been put up on YouTube, it has been subsequently ripped down. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to play the audio. Maybe perhaps the video, obviously, is probably itself is one of the things that probably gets ripped down. And I don't know if I don't think it's the German company itself, because they put it up on LiveLeak and it's not ripped down from LiveLeak. So obviously you can see it's YouTube playing the censorship game. Anyway, second hour we are going to play in full. It's going to take both segments. And I'll end up interrupting it for the break, but I'll rewind it, a few minutes to get full context. But you guys are going to hear the full interview that the Germans did with Ed Snowden about 2 weeks ago that the NSA and our mainstream media has decided to just black out and act like it didn't even happen, didn't exist. And like I said, when it gets uploaded to YouTube, obviously owned by Google, it gets round filed, it gets memory hold. So tonight you're going to hear the audio of that interview in the second hour. But here in the first hour, I want to cover martial law and I want to cover geoengineering. So when we come back in from break on the second segment of the first hour here, I'm going to play an audio clip for you, actually pretty much coming in. I'll introduce it really quick, but it's going to be Kristen Meghan. She's a former Air Force sergeant, and she... Well, you'll hear for yourself. She's going to blow the lid off of chemtrails for you. If you still think that it doesn't exist, and you think that's a kooky, I can't speak tonight. A crazy kooky. There you go. A crazy kooky conspiracy theory. That's a mouthful, huh? Tongue twister. Say that 5 times or 6 times fast. Anyway, if you think that chemtrails are a crazy kooky tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, you're going to get to hear from an Air Force veteran herself, who she herself, that was her job to test for contaminants in the atmosphere, and she found, well, you'll see. Anyway, you'll see. You'll hear what she has to say. She spoke at I think it was the Save Long Island conference. They had a conference out in Long Island a few weeks ago, and she spoke out there. So it's about 20 minutes. So second segment, I'm just going to let the whole segment cover that, and you're going to get a chance to hear from her. And I'm in the midst of getting her on for an interview. I'd like to interview her and pick her brain not only about chemtrails, more in detail, her experience, in the military, her thoughts on that, and everything else. So anyway, martial law. Let's get into this. Martial law. Why am I bringing this up? Well, if you go over to federaljack.com, right on the front of the website, featured stories section, it's also listed under the politics section, or establishing the police state subcategory. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. You're kidding yourself if you think internment ruling couldn't happen again. He's saying that you're kidding yourself if you think that the Supreme Court would never ever rule again in the future to inter a certain group of individuals, we'll say. Because that's what we did during World War II. I mean, we took the Japanese, we locked the Japanese up because, hey, it was a time of war, and you never know. We could be bombarded by Japanese spies and Japanese enemies, from infiltrators from the inside. We have to lock all Japanese up, even though a lot of them were Americans because they were born here in this country, but they had Japanese ancestry, so you got to go. You can't be trusted. Italians, too. That's the one thing that's not talked about. Italians and Germans were rounded up, too. And shot and killed, I may add. American citizens. American citizens, not foreigners that are here to kill and destroy freedom. No. American citizens that were here, that were rounded up and put in prison camps, and some were shot. Some of them for the offense of just getting too close to the fence and not backing away in time, so the American guard shot them. That's what tyranny looks like. And if you think it can't happen again, it can. Anyway, Scalia told law students at the University of Hawaii that the nation's highest court was wrong to uphold the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, but he wouldn't be surprised if the court issued a similar ruling during a future conflict. That's pretty powerful. So, they wagged the dog. Right? The tail wags the dog. So they wag the dog. Go watch the movie if you don't know what I'm talking about. They make up a fake war scenario. For whatever reason, they take us to war. Look, they wanted to take us to battle in Syria. That would have caused World War III. Right now, if we had done that, right now, things would be very drastically different. And now you have people protesting the war. No, we don't want war. We don't want to go to war. They send out their troops, their shock troops, stormtroopers in their riot gear, round them up, put them in FEMA camps. You're an enemy of the state now. Oh, I know. People think I'm crazy. That will never happen, Popeye. When I used to talk about this stuff 5-6 years ago, people used to think I was insane. And I did public events and screenings and stuff. Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. Largely due in part to the internet, the alternative media. Independent media, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so you have a Supreme Court justice telling you, don't be surprised, it could happen again, and you'd be foolish if you thought differently. If you think that the world is all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, it's not so. So you have a sitting Supreme Court justice telling you this, telling you that he would not be surprised if they had to rule on internment again. Even though they already ruled that it was wrong and they had to pay, they did pay somebody, some money back to these people, but it's insane. Look, if you want to understand the full detail scope of this, look up 2 movies on YouTube. Look up Camp FEMA and Camp FEMA 2. In fact, if you go read the article, I'll drop the link in the chat room, but if you go over to federaljack.com and look up the article with Scalia, where I'm referring to right now, at the bottom of the article, both of them are there. At the bottom of the article, I had to check and make sure, Camp FEMA 1 and Camp FEMA 2 are both at the bottom of the article. I embedded them both. I just want to make sure they were both active and YouTube didn't screw with them. They're good. They're both good. Go watch both movies. It's about 4.5, 5 hours. Take the time to watch it. Watch one tonight, maybe one tomorrow if you don't have all that much time. Take the time. Gary Franchi and William Lewis did a great job putting those films together. I've had William Lewis's wife, Debbie Lewis, on before. We talked about Camp FEMA and some of the other films that they've done. I should get Debbie back on. She's a great guest. She really is. She's got her own radio show, too. You got to check it out. And I can't remember the name of her show right now. Just look up Debbie Lewis. It's William Lewis's wife. She's awesome radio show host. William Lewis is a great guy. So is Gary Franchi. He's over at Next News Network, N3, which, by the way, under the video section on Federal Jack, where it says video, if you hover your mouse over that, the Next News Network is there. If you click on that, it opens up a page I made for them, and it's got their player embedded in it. So if you want to watch the Next News Network feed, it's there. And they're actually picked up by a lot of the local affiliates, I guess you'd say, down here. Some of the news affiliates down here. Some of the local cable, I guess like the smaller cable companies or whatever. Maybe not so much Comcast, but they're on a couple channels down here in certain areas, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, I digress too much. Back to martial law. What a pleasant subject. In a second, I'm going to read you a list of executive orders, but I'm going to play you a clip from Gary and William's movie, Camp FEMA, and it starts off with, during the, Colonel North and the Iran-Contra hearings. My brain is not working tonight. It's lagging behind by about 3 seconds. Good old Ollie North, traitorous piece of garbage he is. I could go off on that. But anyway, during the Iran-Contra hearings, the subject of Rex 84 came up. And Congressman Jack Brooks, who was a Democrat, by the way, so this isn't, I don't want to hear right now someone say, oh, it's probably just a Republican. No, this guy was a Democrat and he was asking questions, so maybe you should pay attention. But during the questioning of Ollie North, they brought up Rex 84, or he brought up, Jack Brooks brought up Rex 84, and Congressman Daniel Inouye proceeded to stop the questioning and tell him that they should have an executive session. Here, listen, this is actually this is a piece of historical fact. This isn't me making stuff up, just to help William and Gary sell a movie, and this isn't William and Gary making stuff up to sell a movie. This comes right from Congressional Record, the beginning part, and then the rest of it you could look up yourself. But anyway, here's this clip from Camp FEMA. Again, I suggest you look up Camp FEMA and Camp FEMA 2 on YouTube and watch both films.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
One of the programs that got exposed during Iran-Contra was Rex 84. And Congressman Jack Brooks, in those hearings, brought up the fact that in reality, FEMA was a cover for a huge continuity of government program in case the American people ever rebelled, and that was the architecture or the blueprint for the illegitimate shadow government to fully take over the functions of the entire federal government, suspend the Constitution, suspend the Bill of Rights, and arrest whoever they wanted to. And FEMA was going to control the camps that the people were going to be put into. And FEMA would be the main governmental institution with different directors over every agency. And now when you watch FEMA on television, it's always a colonel or a general or an admiral in uniform who's over the different departments.
The martial law portions of Rex 84 were outlined in a 1982 memo written by FEMA Deputy John Brinkerhoff. Martial law was to be declared in the event of a national crisis, yet the plan did not define the term national crisis. The plan allowed FEMA to take control of both federal and state governments, appointing military commanders to replace duly elected officials. The plan also called for the rounding up of at least 21 million American Negroes for delivery to numerous military bases converted into prison centers, also known as FEMA relocation camps. Why? Because at that time, African Americans were classified as one of the largest threats to the continuity of the federal government. Who does the federal government consider the biggest threat these days?
The convergence of globalization and technology has created a new brand of terrorism. There were persons who, for whatever reason, came to view their home country as the enemy.
The kind of right-wing, religious-based domestic terrorism.
Disturbing news tonight about homegrown terror.
Part of this is big change in the White House, a new cultural experience, and some of the crazies are coming out of their closet.
Right now, it looks like there is no connection between the men arrested and any known terrorist cell.
Homegrown.
Homegrown, I should say.
Folks, we've got a very serious situation here. I'm holding what is called the right-wing extremism, current economic and political climate, fueling resurgence and radicalization and recruitment. And in it, we talked about the fact that they define pro-lifers as domestic terrorists. They put this in a Department of Homeland Security document, this official assessment, now saying pro-lifers, people that believe in end-time prophecies, people that are opposed to the administration's position on immigration, those of us that are standing up for the sanctity of life and for the sanctity of marriage, all of those are now potential, and this is what they're saying, domestic terrorists.
It's a terrorist next door that could be our bigger threat.
They call people who believe in the sanctity of life, who believe in owning firearms, who believe in serving their country in the military and coming back, who are very concerned about the policies that this nation is embarking on, spending too much money, taxing too much. It's all listed right here. These are the domestic right-wing extremists.
1 million names under the watchful eye of the United States. America's so-called terrorist watch list has hit the record number, according to one of the country's most prominent civil liberties groups.
That's a lot of people to keep track of. They're adding new people all the time.
It's a secret list that you don't know really quite how one gets on, and you don't know how you get off.
Now, I'm going to buttress up the full clip, because William and Gary only used a small clip of it. I'm going to buttress up against the back of this. The full clip without music in the background of Jack Brooks talking to Ollie North about Rex 84. It's only about 2 minutes. Listen.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir?
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
There you have it. I'm sure arrangements can be made for an executive session, meaning there would be no cameras, certain things might be off the record, so to speak. Now why would that question need to be answered in private in an executive session? I mean, these conspiracy theorists, there's nothing to what they have to say about FEMA camps and martial law, right? So why would they need an executive quiet session to talk about martial law and Rex 84? Gee, I wonder. I've talked about this before. I'm going to have to play the audio for you guys again from the King Alfred plan from May. I don't know if I've played any May for you guys here on Truth Frequency. I know I've done it in the past and other places I've been, but I don't think I've ever brought May to the airways for you guys. Who's May? May Brussel. She's like the grandma to Alex Jones and Bill Cooper and the rest of us. She was one of the very first quote-unquote conspiracy theorists back in the 60s that went after the JFK assassination, and then her work expanded out and to cover other stuff too. Anyway, you can check her out. I actually have a link on Federal Jack to the May Brussel Archives website, but I'm going to bring her back for you guys. She talked a lot about the King Alfred plan. She talked a lot about a lot of this stuff, but she brought up the King Alfred plan, and I'm going to have to play that for you guys again. The King Alfred plan is really creepy too. When they say it was a fictional plan and that it wasn't real, but if you read the King Alfred plan, it breaks up the United States into 10 different regions, and you have 10 FEMA regions now. I mean, yeah, I guess that's just a coinkydink, right? Right, just like all the other coinkydinks that happen. Anyway, I'm going to read you a list of executive orders for martial law that are out there. Because not every executive order that the president signs is about locking you up in a FEMA camp and taking away all of your rights. Although most of them do violate your rights in one way, shape, or form, because after all, laws shouldn't be passed on an executive whim. That's just like having a king who needs Congress. Oh, that's right. He said I have a pen and a phone. Anyway, Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of highways and seaports. Executive Order 10995 allows the government to seize control of the communication media, meaning TV, radio, internet, phones, every form of communication. Executive Order 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10998 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11000 allows the government to mobilize citizens into work brigades under government supervision. Let me read that one for you again, just in case you don't think they'll round you up, put you into a camp, and then use you as, slave labor, like so many governments have done in the past. Executive Order 11000 allows the government to mobilize citizens into work brigades under government supervision. Do you understand that? That's not day camp work brigades. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. Executive Order 11003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. Executive Order 11004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. I'm going to read this one again because this one has Agenda 21 written all over it. Executive Order 11004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate entire communities, not just one person or a family. Oh, it's not going to affect us. It's just the Johnsons down the street. It allows them to relocate entire communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned. Hey, you all that live near that nice pristine water source, you can't live there anymore. It has to be abandoned so we can come in and drain the water out. And establish new locations for populations. Kind of like what we did to the Native Americans when we took their land from them. Oh, all this fertile land has been yours for thousands of years. Well, pack your crap up. We're going to move you out to the middle of the desert and put you on something that we call... Oh, it's not a plantation. We can't call it that. Guys, we can't call it a plantation. Hold on. We can't call it... We'll call it a reservation. Still has the T-I-O-N at the end of it. Oh, no. S-I-O-N? Whatever. My spelling is horrible tonight. You got my drift. I was making fun of them. Anyway. Executive Order 11005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. So you have your stuff in public storage? Well, not anymore. The government needs your storage facility now. Get out. You own a little mom-and-pop public storage place? Well, too bad. Too bad. We're taking it over. You can't do that. The Constitution, as they urinate all over the Constitution. Executive Order 11051 specifies the responsibility of the Office of Emergency Planning and gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of increased international tensions and economic or financial crisis. So that means that any of these executive orders can be put into action if pretty much for any reason they feel fit. Hey, we're going to go bomb Syria. We think we're going to get attacked in retaliation for it, so we have to take away all your rights. We have to clamp down executive orders. Bam! They're already on the books. Why do you think there's stoplights on and off ramps on 95 in South Florida for any of you South Floridians? Any of you notice the lights on the on-ramps, especially in Miami-Dade? You go to get on the highway and you have to do one car at a time. You can't just pull up and look and get on and merge like people did for like 50 years. Now you got to come up and come to a complete stop, and there's a camera on top of the light, looking at you, making sure, watching. It's that threat of having somebody watching you. Well, what do you think they're prepping you for? What happens when the light's red and it tells you can't go? But the camera's watching. I can't go on the highway. But Popeye, they would never shut down highways. They would never shut down highways. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of highways and seaports. What? Huh? Yeah, it's real. Don't believe Glenn Beck and the rest of these people that try to debunk it. You research yourself. If you research it yourself, you shall see. We'll be right back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, do your research, investigate martial law, investigate the police state. I have a police state archive over on federaljack.com under the download section. You know, if you go to the site itself, just in the little search bar up at the top, just look under martial law, type in martial law. If you look under the header of politics, we're up at the top there. Submenu will drop down. Look under establishing the police state. That's where all of that stuff will be listed. There's years and years of stuff. I have a ton of movies over in the movie section. I have to update that. There's a bunch of links that are dead now because YouTube has disappeared a lot of documentaries. But whatever's not there, I'm sure you can find a fresh copy of it on YouTube or somewhere else out there on the interwebs. Look for it. Anyway, I want to change gears. As I said, martial law does exist, but I could spend 2 or 3 hours harping on it. There's 2 other things I want to get to. And this section right now, I want to spend the rest of the segment pretty much, I want to give to Kristen Meghan. And you're going to hear her speaking at I think it was the Save Long Island Forum like 2 weeks ago. And she was speaking about geoengineering. And I want you to hear what she has to say. You're going to hear her in about 20 minutes talk about what she found out, what she experienced, and what she went through after she experienced it. And I think it's pretty powerful to hear not only her experience of waking up, because, again, everybody has their own experience, and it's just one more way of showing some of the other people out there that might still be in the military or whatnot, thinking that they're by themselves and they're all alone. Well, they're not. This might have been kept from you. You might not even know, but there's other people out there like you, other whistleblowers. And it serves to show the people that don't believe in chemtrails that, look, here's an insider, and she's telling you that, yes, this is real. I guess maybe she's just a crazy, kooky conspiracy theorist, too. Anyway, let's see what Kristen has to say.
Our next speaker is someone who could tell you firsthand about geoengineering. Her name is Kristen Meghan, and it's taken her a lot of guts to come here and speak what she has to say, so give her a big hand.
This presentation has been brought to you by Gigi Bowman for State Senate and Oath Keepers.
All right, first off, I just want to, I know everyone else has said it, but I really appreciate everybody that has come out here today. It's not just showing up and supporting an event, it's actually listening to those of us who are here to share a message. So, as it was presented to you, I'm here to speak to you about geoengineering. First thing I want to ask you is, who doesn't believe it exists? Anybody here on the fence? Okay. Well, hopefully when you leave here today, you don't just believe it. You share the information that I'm going to share with you, and you get more people on board to stop this unethical crime. I want to show you a video clip because the first thing people ask me about geoengineering is, who are these people? Who are the people that are, kind of pushing the button to get this thing going? One of them, his name is David Keith. And David Keith has been low in the radar for a while. But he has written a book about climate engineering that has basically done more for the truth movement of this than anything. because he is the frontline person that is the #1 advocate for geoengineering. And I want to show you a clip. It's about 6 minutes, so just bear with me.
You ever look at those planes up there? They have contrails behind them.
Maybe all those planes are the contrails. Maybe they're actually spraying chemicals into the atmosphere right now, and Uncle Sam isn't telling us.
Seems extremely unlikely.
That the United States is not telling something to its citizens? That seems extremely likely to me. Read the newspaper.
And of course, there are a lot of problems with what they're proposing. It turns out plants need sunlight.
Yes.
Have you gotten some grief for suggesting this?
Sure. I mean, this is like writing a book that's the case for leprosy.
Well, first of all, let me ask you this question, because there's a rumor, I don't know if this is true or not, that some scientists are trying to figure out a way to block the sun to try to slow down global warming.
Could an individual start this?
In practice, only a country.
Okay. What about a man in like a hollowed out volcano with henchmen who occasionally shakes his fist at the sky and says, "They said I was a fool at Harvard. Who's the fool now?"
It's All Things Considered from NPR West. I'm Arun Roth. If scientists get the calculations wrong, it could be catastrophic for life on Earth. Or what if the technology got into the wrong hands? Couldn't someone shoot poison into the atmosphere?
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid. You're bearing the lead. Is there any possible way this could come back to bite us in the ass?
You put another kind of pollution, sulfur dioxide, up to orbit, cover the atmosphere. The sky won't be really blue in the way it is now anymore.
Blanketing the earth in sulfuric acid, because I'm all for it. This is the all-chocolate dinner. I still get to have my CO2, and I just need to spray sulfuric acid.
Right.
All over the earth.
Right. But we put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay, and that's good or bad?
It's terrible.
But it'll be better if we put more in. So if it kills 1 million people and we're only doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math. So killing people is not the objective here.
Killing people, not the objective. I just wanted to be clear.
Because some very mainstream scientists are saying that the climate change situation is so bad that saving life as we know it might require something radical, like shooting chemicals into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight.
This is the kind of stuff I wake up sweating about. Exactly.
Well, it's your goddamn idea.
No, it actually turns out to be an old idea. This was known since President Johnson. And the scientific community mostly decided not to talk about it.
What happens to the sulfuric acid after it's sprayed? Does it just stay up there?
No, it rains down. Okay. But as I said, it rains down.
Okay.
It's a tiny addition.
Okay.
And you put, say, 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year, and each year you have to put a little more, and this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in emissions.
We'll get to it eventually,
But it does.
In the meantime, we're shrouding the earth in sulfuric acid.
So it is that you could actually spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a ugly tech fix.
You can spray something into the atmosphere to change.
Spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
So in the end, pollution saves them all. We owe pollution. We owe acid rain an apology, is what you're saying.
A totally imperfect technical fix.
Okay.
It would have risks. It wouldn't get us out of the long-run need to stop polluting, but it might actually save people and be useful.
Sky won't be really blue in the way it is now anymore.
The chemtrails are being used in conjunction with HAARP by spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from HAARP to heat those metal oxides. The temperature of the sky is raised to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, preventing the accumulation of water vapor that would otherwise form clouds and produce rainfall.
For somebody who's actually out there violating the ethics of their job to promote geoengineering. I'm going to talk about geoengineering, but I want to share a story with you. Every time I'm asked to speak, I public speak for a living. I'll go into that, but I don't get nervous to speak to you. What I get nervous about is not getting emotional telling you my story. Because in 2002, shortly after 9/11, like a lot of military veterans, I raised my right hand and I took an oath to the Constitution to hopefully do something meaningful with my life. 19 years old, unsure what I wanted to do. So I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. My job in the U.S. Air Force was working in bioenvironmental engineering. So what bioenvironmental engineering is in the Air Force is equivalent to that of the OSHA and the EPA, if you're familiar with that. So we were an embedded liaison to make sure that we were tracking all of the aspects and impacts of the military, meaning what is the military doing and how is it impacting the environment, because we were accountable for that. Being government, we did not get any special treatment. We just couldn't be fined being another federal agency. EPA can, but not OSHA. So from the health side, it was knowing what you do in the Air Force. What does your job entail that is hazardous to your health? And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you were an aircraft painter, you were a mechanic. My job would go out to make sure I knew everything that you did, what you were exposed to, and how to mitigate and engineer out those hazards. Because we needed to, one, it's your legal right to be working in a safe and healthful work environment. So throughout 9 years, I worked as an industrial hygienist and an environmental specialist. There's two bases I was at that are called air logistics centers. What does that mean? It's not like a fighter wing, it's not really fun and amazing. What they did is they took aircraft that around every 10 to 15 years, they were required to be dismantled down to the last screw. So that meant every single industrial process you can think about, checking the metal integrity, making sure everything's good to go, or sometimes overhauling equipment. Part of my job in tracking the health hazards was to look at any time someone wanted to buy a chemical, any type of chemical. It was ordered through a system, and in that system, I had to go in there and say, the country we're in, we're not allowed to use this. We need to substitute it out with something a little less hazardous, while also maintaining the integrity for a technical order, meaning for that process, it says you must use, xylene or toluene to do this process. Well, I have to kind of fast forward. I want to say around 2006, I started kind of opening my eyes to how the military wasn't really what I thought it was. And people approached me knowing what I did for a living and said, have you ever heard of chemtrails? Well, I hadn't. And that sparked my interest. So I went online and I looked at chemtrails. I saw a lot of, debunking, a lot of sites that were just kind of calling it a conspiracy theory. And I thought, well, geez, this is what I do for a living. Preventive health, making sure that people are not getting sick, especially in the workplace, and by things that we're doing that can affect, human health and the environment. To summarize it, in an attempt to debunk this conspiracy theory as I thought it was, I didn't debunk it. It literally changed my life. Like I said, this is hard for me because it's not easy standing here and telling my story. One day I was going through that computer system, which if you want to look it up, it's called an Air Force Form 3952. It is the approval of hazardous materials. I was finding tons and tons of large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium in the forms of oxides and sulfates. And of course I knew that there's industrial processes you may not have heard of, but it's bead blasting, pneumatic sanding, shot peening. There is certain medias that's similar to that is used. However, I had already accounted for that. I would sit and look at this computer system and say, this shop wants to order this paint. I'm going to tie it to a task. We had to know what was being used, why it was being used, tracking it cradle to grave on how we were going to dispose of it to be compliant with OSHA and the EPA. One of the legal requirements in approving these is looking at what used to be called the material safety data sheet. On that sheet, it's going to list the manufacturer. It's going to list some maybe required personal protective equipment that needs to be used or some ways to mitigate the exposures. These electronic MSDSs did not have a manufacturer name. They were very vague. They almost looked to me like somebody had made it and scanned it into the system. So I asked the question, what is this being used for? I never got an answer, so I didn't approve it. And it sat there. And then the heat came down. Why aren't you? Are you behind on your 3952s? Only a select few of us did that. So I started asking questions. And at that point, my demonization began. You know, I made my rank. I was decorated. I was a non-commissioned officer of the quarter. I won lots of awards. I had no reason for anyone to attempt to demonize me. So then I get moved over to the other Air Logistics Center. There's only 2 in the Air Force, which is in Warner Robins, Georgia. This kind of carried with me, and I thought, you know what? Should I revisit this? Is it worth it? Did I hit something? Maybe it's need to know. I started finding the same things at Robins Air Force Base. I was now doing some more investigation work. Part of what I did was to use a high-volume air sampler to air sample up to, I'd say, a football field in about 10 minutes. I also conducted soil sampling because I thought, you know, if this is real and they are spraying this, it's going to get to the ground. So I conducted air sampling, I conducted soil sampling, and I was getting high levels of these contaminants. When I started asking the question again under a new commander, I never in my life thought I would have somebody look me in the face and tell me, I am questioning you. Is there something wrong with you? You've been looking really depressed lately. You know I can put you under a mental evaluation for up to 120 days. Who would take care of your daughter? Because I was divorced at the time. As soon as I heard that, I knew. It validated everything I ever thought. And I thought, I've spent 9 years of my life trying to protect human health, and here we are violating law after law after law. Just sitting here, instead of protecting the people, we are poisoning the people. And I've never got up so much courage from that fear of being thrown in a cage, because when you're in the military, folks, you're a number. You are a number, and every aspect of your life is controlled. I was so lucky that my enlistment was coming up and I was supposed to re-enlist. I ran and did not look back. And I have been blowing the whistle and shouting ever since. And I left October 27th, 2010. Thank you. It didn't just end there, though. You got to remember, there's a whole career field of people that work in bioenvironmental engineering. A lot of those people were told, do not talk to me. Do not talk to her. Do not email her. They were given no contact orders. Because my biggest thing was, if I'm just so, dishonest, don't you think somebody would come out and say, she was never in the military or something negative to discredit me? They've ignored me, but they've tried to silence me. Every time I fly, I am pulled into a secret room. I literally am tagged in the system for the TSA. It is difficult. As an industrial hygienist, I do very well for myself, but it has been so difficult after leaving the federal government to maintain employment. Nowadays, everyone runs background checks on you, and the first thing they look at is, wow, here's a whistleblower. And you ask yourself, if this is true and we are spraying the people, where are the pilots? Where are the people? I don't know if you pay attention, but look at Snowden. Look at Manning. People don't come forward because these supposed Whistleblower Act protections that you have are not enforced, they're not supported, and they really don't exist. But what I want you to take from this is to understand that I am being completely honest with you, and that geoengineering is occurring, it's been occurring, it is not new, and your tax dollars are funding this. I 100% know that the U.S. Air Force was involved, and I think back to all these things that I never had noticed. If you don't know what to look for, you can't look for something. And once I realized a process they were trying to hide, people have come out of the woodworks, from EPA compliance officers to ex-people that I worked with in my career field, who I cannot state for obvious reasons. I've had pilots come forward. I've had people come forward that actually load the canisters on the planes. These people don't come forward because they are afraid that they're going to end up like Snowden. And I continue to speak to let people know I've been screaming about this for 3 years and I'm still here. And why are you so afraid? Because many of these people are on active duty. And if you are willing to die for your country, supporting, the Constitution and defending us from enemies foreign and domestic, you are willing to die for your country, but now you're scared. You are scared and cowardly to talk about this. So I'm not just speaking to all of you in this room, I'm speaking to all those people that are going to watch this online and watch it on YouTube. Because you can come forward, you can help expose this, and we can stop it. So many people want to ask, why? Why is this occurring? That's for later thought. From weather modification to weather weaponry, there's numerous reasons under Agenda 21 and tons of theories. But my job as an industrial hygienist is to make sure that I comply with the laws and enforce them. So it is unethical every day for all the other people that are out there that work in preventive health or even physicians that aren't speaking about this. They need to. So one thing I want to tell you is what you can do about it. The biggest hurdle that we have is disinformation sites. I never say them, but I'm going to today, so that you know if anyone ever gives these to you as a reference to debunk you, it's Metabunk and Contrail Science. Those are two websites that are ran by a government shill named Mick West. And he is a computer gaming programmer who tries to tell you about persistent contrails. So somebody who isn't even credentialed in chemistry or physics or ecology, none of that, is trying to tell you that you're crazy. Okay? So also on social media, don't just hit the share button. There are links. You have to understand that I have met people who used to be purposeful disinformation trolls, as we call them. These people are paid to pretend that they're you, to get you on board to believe a website or an article, just so that you look so vulnerable. And then later it will be deemed non-credible, and then you look non-credible. So please vet, research. And if you have something to write with, I want you to take down my email. It is Kristen, Kristen, Meghan, Meghan, @gmail.com. And by emailing me, I can give you some information for what I'm about to tell you. If you still don't believe it, or you still want to convince people, there's something you can do. You can take a glass jar. It needs to be a glass jar, so there's no BPAs. Take a rain sample and take a snow sample. I tried to discourage the soil sampling because everyone's background of where you live is different. Because a lot of the materials that are used in geoengineering are natural occurring in Earth, just not in the industrialized form that they're used. So if you take these rain samples and you take the snow samples, email me, because I cannot publicly tell you where to send them, because we've actually been blackballed by labs who refuse to run our samples. And a problem that is occurring is people are sending in rain samples to labs that don't realize how low the limit of detection needs to be, because these are nanoparticulates. They are very small. So if you email me, I can tell you where to send in your samples, and it's only around $50. That may be tough on some people, but it's way cheaper than maybe what you assumed. So I just want everyone to know and understand that of all things, of all the freedoms that we are losing, geoengineering is the #1 issue that we are facing. Because you can have guns and money and you can have everything. If you don't have food and water and you are dying of respiratory or neurological illnesses, what does it matter? So you've heard about vaccines, and you'll hear, about smart meters, and you'll hear about other issues like fracking. These are all systemic effects. We are getting overexposed to toxins. People will tell you fluoride's in the water, but it's not a lot. It is a lot, because you're getting it everywhere in your food, water that you drink. Everything is washed with that water. And you're getting your vaccines. All this, it's a coupled systemic effect, and our bodies cannot metabolize these toxins. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story, and I will continue to shout from the rooftops. I don't care how many jobs I lose. I don't care how many friends or family I lose. Because I took an oath. And in 9 years, I was not able to honor that oath. But I am today.
And geoengineering is real, ladies and gentlemen. I've covered this multiple times. I've had Mike Murphy on, one of the filmmakers that made Why in the World Are They Spraying, What in the World Are They Spraying. He's actually a good friend of mine. I've been talking to Mike past couple weeks. I'm going to get him on. I just haven't figured out. Next couple weeks I'll get him on, throwing the schedule around, trying to play with a few things and a few different guests, trying to line a few different things up for everybody. But yeah, I want to get him back on. I mean, geoengineering is a really important topic. I could spend an entire week covering this topic, and it still wouldn't be enough. In a nutshell, there's mad scientists playing with our atmosphere, the air you and I breathe, also the water, because it rains down through the air, plus all the fluoride and all the crap they put in it. But there's mad scientists literally using our environment, our fishbowl, as a chemistry experiment. And they think it's okay. And some people don't want to believe it because they say, well, they wouldn't do that to themselves. I always remind those people that when they first tested the first atomic weapon here in the United States, more than 50% of the scientists that were involved in that test were convinced that when the bomb went off, they were going to ignite the atmosphere or crack the earth. More than half of them were convinced that they were going to end life on the earth with the bomb. And they did it anyway. So I don't want to hear that these crazy bastards wouldn't fly around in airplanes spraying all sorts of chemicals and cancer-causing agents and God knows what else they're spraying for all sorts of different reasons. And remember, they never do something just for one specific reason, so there's multiple benefits to their plan. Spend some time, look up geoengineering, look up people like Dr. Nick Begich. Go over on the DTRH Radio Archives channel on YouTube. I have both What and Why in the World Are They Spraying. Watch both films. Do more research. Read. Unplug your television, unplug Hulu, and read. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is February 6th, 2014. Okay, hour number 2. I'm going to be shifting gears yet again. Hour 1, I started off with martial law and finished up with geoengineering. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, go back in the archives and listen to it. Hour number 2, we're going to switch gears a little bit, not too much. Still the secretive things that are going on behind the scenes, but now we're going to shift gears. Edward Snowden. Ooh, yeah, the oogity-boogity man. Well, that's if you believe the politicians. Although, most polls out there, the majority of people consider him to be a whistleblower, and they consider what he did to be good. The politicians don't like it, of course. Like, we didn't know that was going to happen. The government doesn't like it, of course. Like, we didn't know that was going to happen. Usually when you're caught doing something, you don't like getting caught. And then what happens? You make up all sorts of excuses, right? Especially the people that don't like take personal responsibility, right? What happens when you catch your teenager doing something wrong and, you tell them, they know it's against the rules of the house, so to say, right? And they do it anyway, and you catch them. What happens when you confront them? What do they usually do? Make all sorts of excuses to try to cover up why they did, right? And you see through that. But people still buy the government's BS. Not so much anymore, though. 5 years ago, if I had said to you, they're reading your emails and they're listening to your phone calls, you'd say to me, Oh, Popeye, you crazy kooky tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. You're so adorable. You and your little nuttiness, huh? Oh, rosy cheeks, right? Maybe you'd be afraid of me. Oh my God, that guy's a little wacky. He thinks, kooky, he thinks the government's watching him. What is he, Mel Gibson in that movie Conspiracy Theory? Oh, wait, what? The movie had an earthquake weapon? What, geoengineering? Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway. It's amazing how it's amazing how art imitates life. I'll leave it there. Anyway, back to Representative Mike Rogers. That's right. Representative Mike Rogers. He's the gentleman, I use that term extremely loosely, who decided, well, he hasn't liked Snowden from the get-go, but he has decided to just make an all-out crusade of stupidity in trying to find anything to pin on Snowden. I mean, anything. He's working with the Russians. And I don't remember who exactly it was. It looked like it was obviously an officer of some sort, either Air Force or Army. Guy had a full chest plate of medals and everything. And he asked him, probably one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, somebody, and he asked him, he said, do you think that there's, isn't there evidence out there basically to, say that Snowden's working with Russia, or, trying to, just grasping at straws. And this guy was like, no. And he didn't like that. So now Representative Mike Rogers' new thing is to say that journalists working with Snowden are criminals, and now he's trying to criminalize journalism, saying that they're fencing stolen documents. You got to hear this before I play the Snowden interview. And of course, this stuff is coming out because of this Snowden interview that came out 2 weeks ago, which you guys are going to hear in a second. But you just got to hear Mike Rogers for a second before I get into the blacklisted, blacked out, whited out, whatever you want to call it, censored interview of Edward Snowden. I've only found one copy of it on YouTube so far in all of my search that hasn't gotten taken down yet. Every other one's always been removed, and I'm willing to bet that one will get removed. It's to the point where I won't even upload it to any of my channels because I know they're just going to give a strike to the channel and remove it, and there's no recourse for that. So that's how... I guess that's how afraid of the interview they are. But anyway, let's listen to what Mike Rogers has to say first. Well, here's an example of how afraid they are. Just listen to this. This is him saying that journalists and journalism should be criminalized when they deal with situations like this and whistleblowers.
There have been discussions about selling of access to this material to both newspaper outlets and other places. Mr. Comey, to the best of your knowledge, is fencing stolen material, is that a crime?
Yes, it is.
And would be selling the access of classified material that is stolen from the United States government, would that be a crime?
It would be. It's an issue that can be complicated if it involves a news gathering and news promulgation function, but in general, fencing or selling stolen property is a crime.
So if I'm a newspaper reporter for fill in the blank, and I sell stolen material, is that legal because I'm a newspaper reporter?
Right. If you're a newspaper reporter and you're hawking stolen jewelry, it's still a crime.
And if I'm hawking stolen classified material that I'm not legally in possession of for personal gain and profit, is that not a crime?
I think that's a harder question because it involves a news gathering function, could have First Amendment implications. That's something that probably be better answered by the Department of Justice.
So entering into a commercial enterprise to sell stolen material is acceptable to a legitimate news organization?
I'm not sure I'm able to answer that question in the abstract.
Something we ought to think about, is it not?
Certainly.
And so if there are accomplices in purveying stolen information, shouldn't we be concerned about that?
We should be concerned about all the facts surrounding the theft of classified information and its promulgation.
And interesting, over the Munich conference, where we had individuals tell us that, in fact, there are individuals who are saying to be in possession of this information who are eager to sell this information to other news organizations. Would that be a legitimate exercise on behalf of a reporter?
That's a question now you're getting from the general to the particular. I don't want to talk about the case in particular because it's an active investigation of ours.
It's an active investigation for accomplices brokering and stolen information?
We are looking at the totality of the circumstances around the theft and promulgation.
That's very interesting.
And this is the way these people think. Now, I wonder what Representative Mike Rogers has in his closet that he doesn't want you to know about. I wonder if what kind of information that Snowden might have that might implicate him or people he knows. It's not always directly them. It could be somebody that was one of their backers financially during one of their campaign runs. Happens. I know. It sounds crazy. It sounds like something you would see only on Netflix, Popeye. But you know, art often imitates life. I know what people like to say. Life does imitate art sometimes, especially when it's used to manipulate societies. But often art imitates life. Anyway, I mean, does anybody else just you don't even have to put the Hoffman sunglasses on anymore. I mean, it's that blatant. You know, hey, we caught you with your hand in the cookie jar, little Timmy. No, my hand wasn't in the cookie jar. It was blatantly in the cookie jar. I saw you with it in the cookie. No, my hand was not in the cookie jar. It was not. Dude, you had a cookie in your hand. No, it wasn't. It wasn't a cookie. National security. Metadata. I mean, that's that's basically what they're doing. They're spying on everybody. And there's a lot of people, by the way, that are okay with it. Well, you know, I'm not doing anything. Are you kidding? Can I come over to your house and go through your stuff? No, that's creepy. Well, I can't just go through your wallet and go through your panty drawer and stuff? And go through your kids' drawers and stuff? No. Why not? Oh, I'm a pervert. But that's what the government's doing. They're going through your emails. They're going through your texts. They're going through your phones. They're watching everything you do on surveillance. I know. I know you're not worried because you don't do anything wrong. You're not a terrorist. Yet. I mean, I guess that's really just subjective. What's a terrorist? But I'm making you think too much. Stop it, Popeye! I can't handle the truth. I can't deal with that. I need the Super Bowl. I'm going to go listen to Bruno Mars at the halftime show. That really bothers me that there are people that are okay with it. Well, you know, I'm not a terrorist, so I have nothing to hide. Okay. So then can all of us come over and, live in your house? But can I put cameras up in your house and watch you from my house? Well, no. Why not? Well, you're invading my privacy, and that kind of makes me feel uncomfortable that you want to go in and, watch me in my house and know everything I'm doing. But you're cool with the government doing it. You're cool with the government doing it and then making up crybaby excuses like Mike Rogers there. You sure? Are you sure journalism isn't a criminal act? Are you sure? Are you sure? So, if a journalist stole a pack of gum, would he be arrested for stealing the pack of gum? Yes, sir, but that's apples and oranges. No, not in my world. In my world, where I have a very myopic point of view, where it's only my own and my master's. Ugh. Anyway, let's get to the Snowden interview. Guarantee you, when you hear, and it's not like he's going to say, oh my God, they're popping out of your closet and everything, but he gets into detail. He tells you exactly what they're doing. Key score, everything. No wonder they don't want us to hear it. And he's not such a demon when you just sit and listen to him. Oh my God, the terrorist Edward Snowden actually sounds like a normal guy, and what he's saying has validity. Maybe I should pay attention. Anyway, I digress. On to Ed Snowden. Here we go.
Mr. Snowden, did you sleep well the last couple of nights? Because I was reading that you asked for a kind of police protection. Are there any threats?
There are significant threats, but I sleep very well. There was an article that came out in an online outlet called BuzzFeed, where they interviewed officials from the Pentagon, from the National Security Agency, and they gave them anonymity to be able to say what they wanted. And what they told the reporter was that they wanted to murder me. These individuals, and these are acting government officials, they said they would be happy, they would love to put a bullet in my head, to poison me as I was returning from the grocery store, and have me die in the shower.
But fortunately, you're still alive with us.
Right, but I'm still alive, and I don't lose sleep. Because I've done what I feel I needed to do. It was the right thing to do, and I'm not going to be afraid.
The greatest fear I have, and I quote you, regarding these disclosures is nothing will change. That was one of your greatest concerns at the time. But in the meantime, there is a vivid discussion about the situation with the NSA, not only in America, but also in Germany and in Brazil. And President Obama was forced to go public and to justify what the NSA was doing on legal grounds.
What we saw initially in response to the revelations was sort of a circling of the wagons of government around the National Security Agency. Instead of circling around the public and protecting their rights, the political class circled around the security state and protected their rights. What's interesting is, though that was the initial response, since then, we've seen a softening. We've seen the president acknowledge that when he first said, we've drawn the right balance, there are no abuses. We've seen him and his officials admit that there have been abuses. There have been thousands of violations of the National Security Agency and other agencies, authorities, every single year.
Is the speech of Obama recently the beginning of a serious regulation?
It was clear from the president's speech that he wanted to make minor changes to preserve authorities that we don't need. The president created a review board from officials that were personal friends, from national security insiders, former deputy of the CIA, people who had every incentive to be soft on these programs and to see them in the best possible light. But what they found was that these programs have no value. They've never stopped a terrorist attack in the United States, and they have marginal utility at best for other things. The only thing that the Section 215 phone metadata program, actually it's a broader metadata program, a bulk collection means mass surveillance program, was in stopping or detecting $8,500 wire transfer from a cab driver in California. And it's this kind of review where insiders go, we don't need these programs. These programs don't make us safe. They take a tremendous amount of resources to run, and they offer us no value. They go, we can modify these. The National Security Agency operates under the president's executive authority alone. He can end or modify or direct a change in their policies at any time.
For the first time, President Obama did concede that the NSA collects and stores trillions of data.
Every time you pick up the phone, dial a number, write an email, make a purchase, travel on the bus carrying a cell phone, swipe a card somewhere, you leave a trace. And the government has decided that it's a good idea to collect it all, everything, even if you've never been suspected of any crime. Traditionally, the government would identify a suspect. They would go to a judge. They would say, we suspect he's committed this crime. They would get a warrant, and then they would be able to use the totality of their powers in pursuit of the investigation. Nowadays, what we see is they want to apply the totality of their powers in advance, prior to an investigation.
You started this debate. Edward Snowden is in the meantime a household name for the whistleblower in the age of the internet. You were working till last summer for the NSA, and during this time you collected secretly thousands of confidential documents. What was the decisive moment, or was there a long period of time or something happening? Why did you do this?
I would say sort of the breaking point is seeing the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, directly lie under oath to Congress. There's no saving an intelligence community that believes it can lie to the public and the legislators who need to be able to trust it and regulate its actions. Seeing that really meant for me there was no going back. Beyond that, it was the creeping realization that no one else was going to do this. The public had a right to know about these programs. The public had a right to know that which the government is doing in its name and that which the government is doing against the public. But neither of these things we were allowed to discuss, we were allowed to know. Even the wider body of our elected representatives were prohibited from knowing or discussing these programs, and that's a dangerous thing. The only review we had was from a secret court, the FISA court, which is a sort of rubber stamp authority. When you are on the inside, when you go into work every day, when you sit down at the desk, and you realize the power you have, you can wiretap the President of the United States. You can wiretap a federal judge. And if you do it carefully, no one will ever know, because the only way the NSA discovers abuses are from self-reporting.
We are not talking only of the NSA as far as this is concerned. There is a multilateral agreement for cooperation among the services. And this alliance of intelligence operations is known as the Five Eyes. What agencies and countries belong to this alliance, and what is its purpose?
The Five Eyes Alliance is sort of an artifact of the post-World War II era, where the Anglophone countries of the major powers banded together to sort of cooperate and share the costs of intelligence gathering infrastructure. So we have the UK's GCHQ, we have the US NSA, we have Canada's CSEC, we have the Australian Signals Intelligence Directorate, and we have New Zealand's DSD. What the result of this was over decades and decades was sort of a supranational intelligence organization that doesn't answer to the laws of its own countries.
In many countries, as in America too, the agencies like the NSA are not allowed to spy within their own borders on their own people. So the Brits, for example, they can spy on everybody but the Brits. But the NSA can conduct surveillance in England. So at the very end, they could exchange their data, and they would be strictly following the law.
If you asked the governments about this directly, they would deny it and point to policy agreements between the members of the Five Eyes, saying that they won't spy on each other's citizens. But there are a couple key points there. One is that the way they define spying is not the collection of data. The GCHQ is collecting an incredible amount of data on British citizens, just as the National Security Agency is gathering an enormous amount of data on U.S. citizens. What they're saying is that they will not then target people within that data. They won't look for UK citizens or British citizens. In addition, the policy agreements between them that say British won't target US citizens, US won't target British citizens, are not legally binding. The actual memorandums of agreement state specifically on that they're not intended to put a legal restriction on any government. They're policy agreements that can be deviated from or broken at any time. So if they want to spy on a British citizen, they can spy on a British citizen. And then they can even share that data with the British government that is itself forbidden from spying on UK citizens. So there is a sort of a trading dynamic there, but it's not open. It's more of a nudge and a wink. And beyond that, the key is to remember that the surveillance and the abuse doesn't occur when people look at the data. It occurs when people gather the data in the first place.
How narrow is the cooperation of the German Secret Service BND with the NSA and the Five Eyes?
I would describe it as intimate. As a matter of fact, the first way I described it in a written interview was that the German services and the U.S. services are in bed together. They not only share information, the reporting, the results from intelligence, but they actually share the tools and the infrastructure. They work together against joint targets and services. And there's a lot of danger in this. One of the major programs that faces abuse in the National Security Agency is what's called X-Key Score. It's a front-end search engine that allows them to look through all of the records they collect through worldwide every day.
What could you do if you would sit, so to speak, on their place with this kind of instrument?
You could read anyone's email in the world. Anybody you've got an email address for, any website you could watch traffic to and from it, any computer that an individual sits at, you can watch it, any laptop that you're tracking. You can follow it as it moves from place to place throughout the world. It's a one-stop shop for access to the NSA's information. And what's more, you can tag individuals using X-keyscore, where, let's say I saw you once, and I thought what you were doing was interesting, or you just have access that's interesting to me. Let's say you work at a major German corporation, and I want access to that network. I can track your username on a website, on a forum somewhere. I can track your real name. I can track associations with your friends. And I can build what's called a fingerprint, which is network activity unique to you, which means anywhere you go in the world, anywhere you try to sort of hide your online presence, hide your identity, the NSA can find you. And anyone who's allowed to use this, or who the NSA shares the software with, can do the same thing. Germany is one of the countries that has access to X-keyscore.
It sounds rather frightening. The question is, does the BND deliver data of Germans to the NSA?
Whether the BND does it directly or knowingly, the NSA gets German data. Whether it's provided, I can't speak to until it's been reported, because it would be classified. And I prefer that journalists make the distinctions and the decisions about what is public interest and what should be published. However, it's no secret that every country in the world has the data of their citizens in the NSA. Millions and millions and millions of data connections from Germans going about their daily lives, talking on their cell phones, sending SMS messages, visiting websites, buying things online. All of this ends up at the NSA. And it's reasonable to suspect that the BND may be aware of it in some capacity. Now, whether or not they actively provide the information, I should not say.
The BND basically argues, if we do this accidentally, actually, and our filter didn't work.
Right. So the kind of things that they're discussing there are two things. They're talking about filtering of ingest, which means when the NSA puts a secret server in a German telecommunications provider, or they hack a German router and they divert the traffic in a manner that lets them search through things, they're saying, if I see what I think is a German talking to another German, I'll drop it. But how do you know? You could say, well, these people are speaking the German language. This IP address seems to be from a German company to another German company, but that's not accurate, and they wouldn't dump all of that traffic because they'll get people who are targets of interest who are actively in Germany using German communications. So realistically, what's happening is when they say there's no spying on Germans, they don't mean that German data isn't being gathered. They don't mean that records aren't being taken or stolen. What they mean is that they're not intentionally searching for German citizens.
I'm going to pause it right there because we got the break coming up. I'll rewind it about a minute and a half when we come back in so it's got full context. And when we come right back in, I'll just introduce it, come right back in and go right back to the clip. By the way, this was a big deal in Germany and all throughout the rest of the world. This was like big news, especially in Germany because German citizens are being spied on, right? Their media covered it. International media covered it. What did our media cover? Justin Bieber getting pulled over and then going to Costa Rica, wherever the hell he ran off to. And then all his other troubles. Because he's more important than this. We'll be right back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment, tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. As always, you can go to federaljack.com and check out all of my archives under the archive section there. And when you go to the archive page, it says, 2011, 2012, 13, 14, and then clicking on each one of those brings you to a corresponding page for that year with all of the archives for that year. And then when you click those, that'll open up the post for each individual show, and it's got a description of the show plus links to the download page and everything else, or to the YouTube version of the show itself. But when you go to the main archive page itself, when you first click on the Down the Rabbit Hole archives on the front page there, the main first page that comes up, there's a hyperlink at the top, and you can click that, and that'll take you to the downloadable archive section. Go there and rip the MP3s. There's a lot of people that listen to the show and they're like, "Oh, I'll download them, for work or whatever." I put them on my MP3 player. I put them on my phone. I encourage you to do what they're doing. Put it on a CD. Put it on whatever. That's why the stuff is there. The shows are kind of big. CDs might not fit. But a lot of newer cars now come with the USB hookup, and a lot of the older ones have that little earphone plug jack. So you can download it to an MP3 player on your phone and get a little cable and plug it in. Either way, the audio content is there for you for free. I take out all the commercials, and I render it in high quality CD quality audio for you also. Enjoy. Anyway, but I want to get back to the Edward Snowden audio because we're going to have just about enough time to finish it up. So I'm going to give pretty much the rest of the last segment to finish up the Edward Snowden interview. And I rewound about 2.5 minutes to pick it up with full context because he was in the middle of describing what's going on with German citizens' information. Because, again, this is a German TV interview. And he's explaining how it's all over the world they can do this, but he's explaining to this guy in the case of German citizens, information being picked up and gathered by the NSA. So let's pick it up right where we left off. Here we go. The blacklisted, censored interview of Ed Snowden.
Which means anywhere you go in the world, anywhere you try to sort of hide your online presence, hide your identity, the NSA can find you. And anyone who's allowed to use this, or who the NSA shares the software with, can do the same thing. Germany is one of the countries that has access to X-Keyscore.
It sounds rather frightening. The question is, does the BND deliver data of Germans to the NSA?
Whether the BND does it directly or knowingly, the NSA gets German data. Whether it's provided, I can't speak to until it's been reported because it would be classified. And I prefer that journalists make the distinctions and the decisions about what is public interest and what should be published. However, it's no secret that every country in the world has the data of their citizens in the NSA. Millions and millions and millions of data connections from Germans going about their daily lives, talking on their cell phones, sending SMS messages, visiting websites, buying things online. All of this ends up at the NSA. And it's reasonable to suspect that the BND may be aware of it in some capacity. Now, whether or not they actively provide the information, I should not say.
The BND basically argues, if we do this accidentally, actually, and our filter didn't work.
Right. So the kind of things that they're discussing there are two things. They're talking about filtering of ingest, which means when the NSA puts a secret server in a German telecommunications provider, or they hack a German router and they divert the traffic in a manner that lets them search through things, they're saying, if I see what I think is a German talking to another German, I'll drop it. But how do you know? You could say, well, these people are speaking the German language. This IP address seems to be from a German company to another German company, but that's not accurate, and they wouldn't dump all of that traffic because they'll get people who are targets of interest who are actively in Germany using German communications. So realistically what's happening is when they say there's no spying on Germans, they don't mean that German data isn't being gathered. They don't mean that records aren't being taken or stolen. What they mean is that they're not intentionally searching for German citizens. And that's sort of a fingers crossed behind the back promise. It's not reliable.
What's about other European countries like Norway and Sweden, for example? Because we have a lot of, I think, underwater cables going through the Baltic Sea.
So this is sort of an expansion of the same idea. If the NSA isn't collecting information on German citizens in Germany, are they as soon as it leaves German borders? And the answer is yes. Any single communication that transits the internet, the NSA may intercept at multiple points. They might see it in Germany, they might see it in Sweden, they might see it in Norway or Finland, they might see it in Britain, and they might see it in the United States. any single one of these places that a German communication crosses, it'll be ingested and added to the database.
So let's come to our southern European neighbors then. What's about Italy? What's about France? What's about Spain?
It's the same deal worldwide.
Does the NSA spy on Siemens, on Mercedes, on other successful German companies, for example, to prevail, to have the advantage of knowing what is going on in the scientific and the economic world?
I don't want to preempt the editorial decisions of journalists.
Okay.
But what I will say is there's no question that the U.S. is engaged in economic spying. If there's information at Siemens that they think would be beneficial to the national interests, not the national security of the United States, they'll go after that information and they'll take it.
There is this old saying, you do whatever you can do. So the NSA is doing whatever is technically possible.
This is something that the president touched on last year, where he said just because we can do something, and this was in relation to tapping Angela Merkel's phone, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. And that's exactly what's happened. The technological capabilities that have been provided because of sort of weak security standards in internet protocols and cellular communications networks have meant that intelligence services can create systems that see everything.
Nothing annoyed the German government more than the fact that the NSA taped the private phone of the German Chancellor Merkel over the last 10 years, obviously. Suddenly this invisible surveillance was connected with a known face and was not connected with a kind of watery, shady terrorist background. Obama now promised to stop snooping on Merkel, which raises the question, did the NSA tape already previous governments in Germany, previous chancellors, and when did they do that, and how long did they do this for?
This is a particularly difficult question for me to answer because there's information that I very strongly believe is in the public interest. However, as I've said before, I prefer for journalists to make those decisions in advance, review the material themselves, and decide whether or not the public value of this information outweighs the sort of reputational cost to the officials that ordered the surveillance. What I can say is we know Angela Merkel was monitored by the National Security Agency. The question is, how reasonable is it to assume that she is the only German official that was monitored? How reasonable is it to believe that she's the only prominent German face who the National Security Agency was watching? I would suggest it seems unreasonable that if anyone was concerned about the intentions of German leadership, that they would only watch Merkel and not her aides, not other prominent officials, not heads of ministries, or even local government officials.
How does a young man from Elizabeth City in North Carolina, 30 years old, get in such a position in such a sensitive area?
That's a very difficult question to answer. In general, I would say it highlights the dangers of privatizing government functions. I worked previously as an actual staff officer, a government employee for the Central Intelligence Agency, but I've also served much more frequently as a contractor in a private capacity. What that means is you have private for-profit companies doing inherently governmental work, like targeted espionage, surveillance, compromising foreign systems. And anyone who has the skills, who can convince a private company that they have the qualifications to do so, will be empowered by the government to do that. And there's very little oversight. There's very little review.
Have you been one of these classical computer kids sitting red-eyed during the nights in the age of 12, 15, and your father was knocking on your door and saying, you switch off the light, it's too late now? Did you get your computer skills from that side, or how did it work? When did you get your first computer?
Right. I definitely have had a, shall we say, a deep informal education in computers and electronic technology. They've always been fascinating and interesting to me. The characterization of having your parents telling you to go to bed, I would say, is fair.
If one looks to the little public data of your life, one discovers that you obviously wanted to join in May 2004 the special forces to fight in Iraq. What did motivate you at the time? You know, special forces, looking at you in the very moment, means grim fighting, and it means probably killing. And did you ever get to Iraq?
No, I didn't get to Iraq. One of the interesting things about these special forces are that they're not actually intended for direct combat. They're what's referred to as a force multiplier. They're inserted behind enemy lines. It's a squad that has a number of different specialties in it, and they teach and enable the local population to resist or to support U.S. forces in a way that allows the local population a chance to help determine their own destiny. And I felt that was an inherently noble thing at the time. In hindsight, some of the reasons that we went into Iraq were not well-founding, and I think did a disservice to everyone involved.
What happened to your adventure then? Did you stay long with them, or what happened to you?
No, I broke my legs when I was in training and was discharged.
So it was a short adventure, in other words.
Short adventure.
In 2007, the CIA stationed you with a diplomatic cover in Geneva, in Switzerland. Why did you join the CIA, by the way?
I don't think I can actually answer that one.
Okay, if it's what you have been doing there, forget it, but why did you join the CIA?
In many ways, I think it's a continuation of trying to do everything I could to prosecute the public good in the most effective way. And it's in line with the rest of my government service, where I tried to use my technical skills in the most difficult positions I could find in the world, and the CIA offered that.
If we look back, Special Forces, CIA, NSA, it's not actually the description of a human rights activist or somebody who becomes a whistleblower afterwards. What happens to you?
I think it tells a story, and that's no matter how deeply an individual is embedded in the government, no matter how faithful to the government they are, no matter how strongly they believe in the causes of their government, as I did during the Iraq War, people can learn, people can discover the line between appropriate government behavior and actual wrongdoing. And I think it became clear to me that that line had been crossed.
You worked for the NSA through a private contractor with the name Booz Allen Hamilton, one of the big ones in the business. What is the advantage for the US government or the CIA to work through a private contractor to outsource a central government function?
Contracting culture of the national security community in the United States is a complex topic. It's driven by a number of interests between primarily limiting the number of direct government employees, at the same time as keeping lobbying groups in Congress, typically from very well-funded businesses, such as Booz Allen Hamilton. The problem there is you end up in a situation where government policies are being influenced by private corporations who have interests that are completely divorced from the public good in mind. The result of that is what we saw at Booz Allen Hamilton, where you have private individuals who have access to what the government alleges were millions and millions of records that they could walk out the door with at any time with no accountability, no oversight, no auditing. The government didn't even know they were gone.
At the very end, you ended up in Russia. Many of the intelligence community suspect you made a deal, classified material for asylum here in Russia.
The chief of the task force investigating me, as recently as December, said that their investigation had turned up no evidence or indications at all that I had any outside help or contact or had made a deal of any kind to accomplish my mission. I worked alone. I didn't need anybody's help. I don't have any ties to foreign governments. I'm not a spy for Russia or China or any other country for that matter. If I am a traitor, who did I betray? I gave all of my information to the American public, to American journalists who are reporting on American issues. If they see that as treason, I think people really need to consider who do they think they're working for. The public is supposed to be their boss, not their enemy. Beyond that, as far as my personal safety, I'll never be fully safe until these systems have changed.
After your revelations, none of the European countries really offered you asylum. Where did you apply in Europe for asylum?
I can't remember the list of countries with any specificity because there were many of them. But France, Germany were definitely in there, as was the UK, a number of European countries, all of whom, unfortunately, felt that doing the right thing was less important than supporting U.S. political concerns.
One reaction to the NSA snooping is in the very moment that countries like Germany are thinking to create national internets, an attempt to force internet companies to keep their data in their own country. Does this work?
It's not going to stop the NSA, let's put it that way. The NSA goes where the data is. If the NSA can pull text messages out of telecommunication networks in China, they can probably manage to get Facebook messages out of Germany. Ultimately, the solution to that is not to try to stick everything in a walled garden, although that does raise the level of sophistication and complexity of taking the information. It's also much better simply to secure the information internationally against everyone rather than playing let's move the data. Moving the data isn't fixing the problem. Securing the data is the problem.
President Obama, in the very moment, obviously doesn't care too much about the message of the leak. And together with the NSA, they do care very much more about catching the messenger in that context. Obama asked the Russian president several times to extradite you, but did not. It looks that you will stay till the rest of your life probably in Russia. How do you feel about Russia in that context? And is there a solution to this problem?
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that these leaks didn't cause harm. In fact, they serve the public good. Because of that, I think it'll be very difficult to maintain sort of an ongoing campaign of persecution against someone who the public agrees serves the public interest.
The New York Times wrote a very long comment and demanded clemency for you. The headline, Edward Snowden, whistleblower, and I quote from that. The public learned in great detail how the agency has extended its mandate and abused its authority. And the New York Times closes. President Obama should tell his aides to begin finding a way to end Mr. Snowden's vilification and give him an incentive to return home. Did you get a call in between from the White House?
I've never received a call from the White House, and I'm not waiting by the phone. But I would welcome the opportunity to talk about how we can bring this to a conclusion that serves the interests of all parties. I think it's clear there are times where what is lawful is distinct from what is rightful. There are times throughout history, and it doesn't take long for either an American or a German to think about times in the history of their country where the law provided the government to do things which were not right.
President Obama obviously is, in the very moment, not quite convinced of that, because he said you are charged with 3 felonies. And I quote, if you, Edward Snowden, believe in what you did, you should go back to America, appear before the court with a lawyer and make your case. Is this the solution?
It's interesting because he mentions 3 felonies. What he doesn't say is that the crimes that he's charged me with are crimes that don't allow me to make my case. They don't allow me to defend myself in an open court to the public and convince a jury that what I did was to their benefit. The Espionage Act was never intended. It's from 1918. It was never intended to prosecute journalistic sources, people who are informing the newspapers about information that's of public interest. It was intended for people who are selling documents in secret to foreign governments, who are bombing bridges, who are sabotaging communications, not people who are serving the public good. So it's, I would say, illustrative that the president would choose to say someone should face the music when he knows the music is a show trial.
Edward Snowden, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
You see, he's not so much of a monster after all. And again, you know, none of us really know who he is as an individual. I mean, he really could be a faker, right? There is the theory out there that he's... I'm not talking about the government's theory that's working with the Russians, please. Cold War. They're trying... I mean, you want to talk about trying to bring everybody back to Cold War paranoia. They're attacking the Sochi Olympics, too. Verbally. Oh, my God, there's going to be a terror attack. Anyway, I digress. Good interview. Really good interview. Anyway, believe what you want to believe, right? I don't expect you to walk away from my broadcast believing anything. Snowden, I don't know. I'm still kind of up in the air. Not 100% sure about him, but his information, regardless, has proven to be accurate so far. Glenn Greenwald, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, he's a journalist. I don't always agree with some of the stuff he's talked about or written about or his opinion and everything. I do think they should release more of the information that they have access to. I think sitting on it is I have an issue with what they're doing. I think I mean, obviously they're trying to make a little bit of money off it. I think they're trying to set themselves up because they probably figure after this they might have financial difficulty for a while here or there. Who knows? So maybe they're trying to set themselves up to have some money in the bank to fall back on. But I do think they should be releasing more of the information that they have. You know, Glenn Greenwald and the not the Guardian, the other guy he's hooked up with. I can't remember his name right now. They're putting together some sort of new media conglomerate type thing. But he should still release more of the information. So I don't really agree with everything Glenn Greenwald has ever said or done, or the way he's handling all of this right now. But the information itself is paramount. And people can hate on Snowden, people could not trust him, whatever. You still deserve to hear the full interview with the guy. I mean, so I don't like the President of the United States, and I don't agree with his policies. I still listened to the State of the Union. I critiqued it live with Joe. You were all there, most of you, right? Maybe you guys heard it on the archive or on YouTube. But you were all there, or you heard it. I didn't like it, but I listened to it in order to critique it. Same thing with the interview. You may not like Snowden, but in order to critique things he says, you have to listen to what he said. Otherwise, you're really not going to be critiquing anything with any real merit, any real logic. And it's just as bad as somebody trying to debate us with shinfo or no info or ignorance, right? So don't put yourself in that place of ignorance. Even if you don't like the guy, listen to what he has to say. And what he has to say is a pretty big deal. They're spying on everything. They're spying on everything worldwide. And then, you know, every time you turn your head, you could put a blindfold on, spin around 30 times, and chuck a rock in any direction, and you're going to hit a story lately where something new comes out where the NSA was spying on you. Angry Birds, a video game for cell phones. I think you can put it on your computer too. I really wouldn't call it a video game. I would call it a game to amuse the general public. More bread and circus. But anyway, the NSA spied on people through the game. In your phone. A game people buy, they download onto their phone. How many other apps have they spied on you? So, what he's got to say has some legitimacy, do you not think? Maybe we should pay a little bit more attention to this? Perhaps us conspiracy theorists weren't so wrong after all. Believe me, I don't like being able to say, told you so, especially on this. We're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I'll catch you all again live tomorrow night. Until then, as I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. Look inside yourself for the hero that I know is inside you. I love you all. I'll catch you all.